Hello. It's another Monday. It's 8:30, so that means another open source recovery episode. And we have some really great guests lined up for you tonight that I'm excited about. And we're going to continue our theme that we've had over the last few weeks. I'm just waiting for Mr. Young to be done. Hello out there in Radio Land. Hey, our co-host Jackie is sneaking in, and I'm outing her on the air. I'm glad she's here, though. So tonight we're gonna continue our theme that we've had over the last several weeks, talking about recovery and talking about opiate addiction in particular, and talking about the role of families and the role of stigma in recovery. I think if you've been listening, you know that a few weeks ago we had some guests on who were talking about the importance of what families need to go through in their struggles with loved ones who have opiate dependency, and the importance of raising money to support those individuals, not just the individuals who are afflicted by the addiction, but those who are affected. And if you remember, a few weeks ago, we had a very brave woman who came on and talked about the passing of her husband from opiate overdose, and Ismarie, and yes, and who Ismarie is, by the way, Jackie, Ismarie contacted me, and I'm going to have her come to my practice and sit down and talk to some of my clients and groups.
That's awesome.
Because I think she has a very powerful story to tell. And it's a reminder for everyone, not that, unfortunately, we don't need too much of a reminder, but it's a reminder about the deadly nature of this illness.
Yeah, a young, beautiful couple.
Yep.
It's still in the honeymoon period.
Yes. And I think, Ismarie's, her courage was really about combating the stigma against people with addiction, including her husband, obviously.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk more about that this evening. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guests, and I'll actually just introduce them very briefly, and then I'm going to have them introduce themselves and talk to you about the importance of their organization. Again, we were talking last week, this is one of those grassroots organizations, right? This is not something that comes from a government-funded program or project or that kind of thing. And there's, I could probably do a different show every Monday with a different grassroots organization, and it's amazing. And I think, as I said on the air a few weeks ago, that's both great and sad at the same time in a way, right? It's great because people are not just standing by waiting for the solution. The impact that this is having on their families and their lives and people around them, they're taking action, and they're forming their own nonprofit organizations, and they're going out there and making a difference, and that's what you're going to hear about tonight. But it really says something about the level of the epidemic we're facing when the number of grassroots organizations out there are just so prolific. But there's a lot of people doing really, really inspiring work. So I'm going to let Donna and Matt talk to you about what they do. And I am going to be getting involved with this organization personally. So I'm very excited that they're here, and I'm very excited to become in the near future part of what they do, because I really believe in their mission. And I really believe that so many families need support, help, guidance, and education, and that can directly lead to the prevention of some of the really horrible outcomes that we have. And I'm not just talking about death. I mean, we always talk about the number of deaths, and of course, as I said, that's the number one thing we want to avoid, right? But how many people's lives have been severely impacted by addiction, and opiate addiction in particular, without necessarily coming to that final consequence, jails and loss of family, loss of jobs, loss of hope, and just a lot of desperation. So for every individual who succumbs to the fatality of opiate addiction, there's how many thousands more out there struggling on a daily basis to reclaim their lives. And if education and support for family members can reduce that, then so be it. And I believe it can and does. So, I'm Jackie. I'm kind of counting on you a little bit to talk about. No, I was saying
My
before.
trials and tribulations.
No, not just yours in particular, but the aspect of your eventual recovery and the role of your family in that, and the role of your support system in that, and maybe when you hear specifically about the kind of resources our guests are providing, maybe you might think about how your family could have benefited, if they didn't get that opportunity.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I was telling our guests that I thought that was going to be something that you can add tonight.
Absolutely.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but I think I just did.
It's payback for not being here the past
That's
couple
right.
weeks.
All right. So, Donna and Matt, if you'd like to just kind of introduce yourselves, and we also have another guest here, Teresa, but she's very sick and she sounds like a frog, so I'm not going to make her speak.
Everybody's sick these
But
days.
she's very lucky, because otherwise I would go on and on about Teresa, and I'm going to have her come back to talk about the work that she does, which is beyond prolific in this, to fighting this epidemic. So, hi Donna.
Hi, Mark.
Is this-
How are you?
Good. Is this your first time on radio?
It's actually our second time on the radio.
Oh, very good. Okay.
We did a NPR radio spot.
You did, see?
We did. We went big
big.
time.
I
gonna
thought
say.
we thought we were something.
I know.
How did you have to tell me how you pulled that off? I want to be on NPR.
We have no idea. How did we do that, man?
No, that's terrific. Yeah. And maybe I think that speaks to what someone from NPR must have thought what you're doing was really unique and important, right?
It's funny, but I do believe that it was our Demas connection that got us on NPR. The commissioner we'd been in her company, and we'd been, kind of at a lot of different state events, and she recommended that they were looking for people who experience this as families, and we certainly have a family story to tell. And so I think she recommended us, and we said yes. And
Why
we
wouldn't
sat
you?
there nervous and biting our nails. We're much more relaxed tonight.
Well, yes. Well, we're not NPR, so you should totally relax. So. We have about half the listeners. So.
It's okay.
So, do you want to maybe just start by talking just broadly about your organization and what it's about, and
Sure.
how it came about?
Sure. I mean, in order to understand how the organization came about, it really, you have to know what our story is, our
Right.
history. So I'll try to be brief.
No, you don't have to be brief. We have
You
a
can
whole
get the
hour.
hook, and so so exposure, disclosure. I am a mom of 4 children. And 2 of my 4 children are afflicted with substance use disorder. So 2 of them, have this disease of addiction. And when our first son was struggling, and this began really about 19 years ago, I didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do.
Right.
As a couple, intact family, I was a school principal. I was, a lifetime educator as a profession. And we had no idea where we were going with this. When our second son, Matt, then he became similarly afflicted. Yeah, we were just, out of our minds with,
Sure.
where to go, what to do. And so really selfishly, I said, okay, I need to talk to other parents who've been in the same situation and kind of, be in company with them so that I could find out, how to help. I thought that if I got direction on how to help them, that, I could save them.
Right.
And boy, was I wrong about that. What we did was we started a conversation, myself, my child's best friend's mom, and we invited a skilled facilitator into the conversation. And we learned that the journey was not about fixing our kids. It was about fixing ourselves. And that was really a staggering kind of realization, because I didn't think I was so broken. I thought, okay, I could, send my children off to treatment, and, various types of treatment, outpatient, inpatient, detox, psychiatry, psychology, aftercare, and get them fixed. Oh, wilderness therapy, Matt, I forgot about Utah. And then, they'd get fixed and come home, and we'd live happily ever after. Their disease would be cured, and we'd be fine.
Of course.
And that is definitely not how it happened. It was in no way a straight trajectory in our family. And so what happened was our kids had their journeys, and their journeys took them to various dark places, and it took them both into recovery, which I'm thrilled about and so grateful for. But really what I learned was what I needed to do, what we needed to do as a family, was look within, get introspective, and look at the toxicity that can exist in a family that is wrought with substance use disorder, addiction, and everything that goes along with that. There's a path of destruction that could ensue when, one's loved one is in the throes of the disease. And that makes us all sick. And so we started a conversation, me, my friend, and that skilled facilitator we brought into the conversation. And that developed into an organization that began parent support groups. Because honestly, selfishly, when I did my research, I found that in the state of Connecticut, if you're looking for a 12-step, like an Al-Anon program, best practices, right? Back then, and I really honestly still think today it exists the same way, out of 225 Al-Anon meetings that go on, that are offered on a weekly basis, only 4 of them are parent-focused. And I've said this before, selfishly, I wanted to sit next to other people who were parents, because I couldn't necessarily identify with a spouse or, somebody whose parent was using. I wasn't, an adult child of an alcoholic. I couldn't divorce my kids, much as I wanted to, at times. And so it was then that we designed the group with that in mind, so that we wanted parents, family members, caregivers to gather. We wanted psychoeducation so that we would get information, the proper information,
Right.
filtered, and not to have a group go rogue necessarily if misinformation was perpetuated.
And I hate to say this because I'm a big proponent of 12-step recovery and of the resource that 12-step programs, including Al-Anon, offers. However, as we were talking about just before the show started, opiate addiction is a little bit of its own animal, and I don't think if you went to the average Al-Anon meeting, you would get some misinformation about how to approach helping a family member, whether it be husband, son, daughter. I don't believe you'd get all the accurate information you need.
And that's what was also corroborated by Matt when he can talk about his own journey, but when he started in AA and his 12-step meetings, he said, the same thing. So when we developed CARES as it exists today, he affirmed that, without the professional, at some point, that skilled counselor who can, steer people in the right direction, talk about the neurochemistry of addiction, talk about changes in the brain, talk about what's happening physiologically, psychologically. It's really critical.
Yes.
And so that was one of the components that we found was critical, and the other was to be able to allow or facilitate crosstalk. What I found when I went to the parent-focused Al-Anon meetings was it was wonderful information, and there was great reflection, but I was absolutely desperate for some tangible information, and I found that the meeting after the meeting was the most helpful
Right,
for me,
right.
which
Yeah.
is, where are you going to find the resources? Where are you going to find, where to go for treatment? Where am I going to get a referral for my own counseling or marriage counseling? Because this disease absolutely polarizes families, and it is a miracle that, our own marriage is intact with, given, two sons and very differing views and approaches to how to handle.
Right, and without really good information, people handle those issues. They handle the symptoms of addiction in very different ways, and based on common sense, what they've heard, what they've learned, their personality, their culture, but not necessarily on what the most effective thing to do is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then
Well, it's also the view, too, that the problem is the addict. That is the problem. And once they stop using, everything's going to be fine. But that's not how it is. Everybody has a new normal,
Right. Right. And my kids would, come back from treatment into, the same toxic
Yeah.
environment. It's not
Well, not necessarily it was toxic, but it was, things had to change,
definitely.
You can't expect him to change and not everyone else.
Right. Right. And that's what we learned over time. And that's what we saw unfolding in all the families that would come to the group. If we kept the group theme and topic and focus on our own growth, education, our own recovery, because I was addicted to my kids' addictions. I was addicted. And I still fall into relapse every once in a while, with certain patterns of behavior that are really, counterproductive to my own recovery and theirs. But we found that families started healing, not just the people who were coming to group, but their loved ones were faring better.
right.
And that was an amazing,
Sure.
phenomenon because, and over time, we have learned that there have been exponentially less substance-related tragedy among the group members who come on a consistent basis. And that is like one of the greatest joys that I've had over these last 17 years that I've been doing these groups.
Yeah. I bet you I wonder if you've given thought to just why that is. Like, what's the relationship between the support and education family members are getting and the outcomes that their loved ones are receiving? Have you thought about that?
I think about it all the time. I'm going to let Matt actually jump in.
That's it.
Here.
Before we do, I just want to point out, I just want to make sure that our listeners hear the name of your organization and the locations and all that. Can you give that basic information?
Sure. We are the CARES group. CARES is an acronym for Community, Addiction, and Recovery, Education, and Support. And currently we are running 4 support groups for parents, caregivers, siblings, family members, aunts, uncles, loved ones, grandparents come. Anybody who cares about and loves somebody who is afflicted with substance use disorder. And our 4 towns currently in Connecticut are Danbury, which is where our main office is, Shelton, we have a group in New Milford, and also one in Trumbull.
And this reminds me a little bit of an organization I know you're familiar with called NAMI. Mm-hmm. I've been to many NAMI meetings as a guest and things like that. And NAMI is National Alliance for Mentally Ill. and it's for people with mental illness and or their families. I think it's probably more heavily populated by people who have a loved one who has mental illness, and they go there for support, and they go there for education. And I was once a guest speaker at an NAMI meeting. It was quite a large meeting. It was in California. There was maybe almost 100 people there, and I did a little experiment with him. The topic I was discussing was co-occurring disorders, mental illness and addiction. So I did a little experiment. I had everyone close their eyes, and I asked everyone to raise their right hand if they were there because they had a mental health issue or their family members had a mental health issue. And of course, everyone raised their right hand. And I asked them to keep their eyes closed, and then I said, if you and or your loved one also has a substance abuse issue, please put your left hand up. Then I said, okay, now open your eyes and look around the room. And there was a flabbergasted looks of people staring at a whole bunch of people staring at each other with two hands up. It was very telling. I mean, I would say 70% of the people had both hands up, and they were all pretty shocked about that.
It's so funny that you say that, because when people first come into a CARES group, they think, as I mentioned, that they're there for
substance abuse.
And for another person,
right?
Somebody that they love, their child, their spouse, their partner, their loved one. And what we realize over time is that introspection that has to occur, that challenge that has to occur for ourselves, where we really have to dig deep into those reasons that we think that we can, fix somebody else. So going back to your question, why do I think that there's, why do I think this works, this
right.
model works? I think it works because we, for so many reasons. Number one, speaking from that codependent individual who contributed to her kids' diseases, unwittingly contributed to their diseases by either, just wanting to believe that, it would just go away, or wanting to believe that this was a phase, or thinking that I could fix it, thinking that I could, whatever it is, I could, cry it away, I could shame it away out of them, I could pray it out of them, like all the things that I realized over time I could not do. I think that's one of you have to be brave enough, over time, and courageous enough to look inward and say, I might, even though I didn't cause it, I can't control it, I can't cure it, but maybe I'm contributing in some way, and that's where I think people are sometimes brought to their knees in a good way, where they're looking, okay, at their family dynamic, and they're looking at patterns of behavior that have just existed because they've existed, because they don't know any different, or they don't know any better.
It's the norm.
Right? Mm-hmm. And we've always done that, and it's scary to stop doing something we've always done unless we have something to replace it with.
Right.
And I think that's one of the most wonderful things about the group, because the veterans, those who've been coming, and our people keep coming for years. They just keep coming to the group, and they will take a newcomer and just impart this amazing wisdom and experience. And it's that part, I love to just watch that unfold, because by the time somebody steps into the group, they've reached a point of either exhaustion or desperation.
Yeah. And it's unparalleled, that value of just having somebody that understands what you're going through in that moment.
Right.
Yeah, that's what's referred to by a guy named Irvin Yalom, who wrote the book about group therapy as universality. It's what's in 12-step meetings, it's what's in group therapy, it's in any support. It's a very important component of the therapeutic component of any kind of support group.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say that the change that occurs for new parents who come into the group, allows their loved one to experience two things. I would venture to say that that allows the loved one. I'm going to ask Matt to back me up on this, to experience more empathy, and it allows them to experience hope that the family and home life can change in a way that they can be successful in. And those two things, empathy and hope, have been very, very highly correlated with treatment outcomes. So when a family members are eventually able to provide more empathy and more to their family member who's suffering, and more hope that things are going to change, not just with you as the identified problem, right?
Right.
And I think that gives the chance of outcomes, going the direction that Matt has gone. That I think that increases that chance. That would be my theory. It'd be an interesting dissertation.
It really would. I completely agree with you. There wasn't much empathy going on when I was, really, my husband and I were feeling very victimized.
Right.
And
Because it doesn't make sense. It's like common sense and everything else would tell you, like, you should. Who does these things?
Right.
But you can't use logic on a ration now with the disease of addiction. It doesn't work. If consequences worked, none of us would be sitting here talking about it.
That's exactly right.
So, what do you think, Matt? Am I onto something there? Because I saw your head nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it shows a level of commitment. A lot of the times, a family is asking a lot of their loved one, at least in their loved one's mind, to take away that comfort blanket, to take away everything they've ever known, and just stop doing it. It seems easy. And I think that in order to ask that of your loved one, you should be obligated to show a little bit of a commitment that, you're going to change a little bit of the response pattern that you've had over
Right.
the years that you've been associated with this. You're going to at least have the commitment to get educated.
Right.
If it's simply that and nothing more, that showing that commitment to get educated, in my opinion, is one of the greatest showings of love, you can possibly give your loved one. Because for so much of it, it's punitive, it's a judgment, it's negative.
Right.
Whereas that's kind of some coming together in solidarity to solve the problem, find a solution rather than point and blame.
That's right. And that willingness to get that education, and that education will invariably turn to empathy, I think. It's hard to get the education and not become more empathetic. And the solidarity that you mentioned, there was I always forget this gentleman's name, but there was a very interesting TED Talk not too long ago about addiction, and I really liked the conclusion that the gentleman who did the TED Talk, I can't remember his name, but he talked about addiction being a lack of connection.
I've heard
Right?
the same one.
Right.
Yep.
And the antidote to that being connection. So if you feel disconnected from your family and you feel like the scapegoat or whatever, the bad guy, and suddenly the issue is this is a family illness, this is something we're all involved in, we're all getting educated to help you, then suddenly the connection is possible again.
Well, maybe it's a stretch to associate these two things together, but growing up my whole life, and I can sure there's millions of parents out there that do the same. You go to your kids' sports practices, you go to their games, you're interested and you're involved in what they're interested in, and you have to be, and you can look at it as a negative light, but what I was involved in was addiction, so to show that commitment from my family to get educated, to show up for my practices, to do something that's going to help them understand me better.
Right.
That meant a lot to me,
Right.
Early on in my recovery, that especially going away and being in treatment and seeing how little people's families are associated with their lives and how little people's families want to understand what it is that their loved one's going through, and how disconnected a lot of people are from their families. It really, once I was able to have a clear head and to look at that for what it was, it really did. It showed me how much my family hadn't given up on me, and how much they still did love me and wanted to understand, wholeheartedly what it was I was going through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I got to think that that's giving you a better chance to come out on top of things.
I do. I really do. With hindsight, I don't know where I would be today if all of these things hadn't taken place. If my family didn't get educated. The reality is that my mother was running support groups and facilitating support groups and had these support groups for many, many, many years while I was still using. So I think in her journey, in the same time, it took her a while to realize what exactly her role was in those groups and what she was getting out of it. Because there was a time when I was using when it was all punitive, right. When those questions were, why can't you just stop?
Right.
And when that response pattern changed, when it was, no, they weren't accepting of what I was doing, but at the same time, there was an acknowledgement that they loved me, they cared for me, and they were here for me if I wanted to stop. And that made all the difference in the world, because when I was ready,
you walking through that door. Yeah.
I walked up 2 flights of stairs, I knocked on the bathroom door, and I said, I need help.
Right.
Whereas not many people have that type of comfort level with they've been beaten down, kind of their whole life as this punitive result of their actions, that they don't feel comfortable enough or safe enough to come and ask for help. And by the grace of God, and I'm lucky enough to have gotten to a point where I did. I felt like I could at least ask for help. If I wasn't going to divulge into how truly bad it was, I knew that without being judged, criticized, yelled at, grounded, taken away, everything, I knew I could go and say I need help, and that they were going to go to the ends of the earth to make that happen for me.
Yeah, that's a whole different ball game, I think. To have that knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think it would, we know that this illness doesn't get better in a perfect trajectory. So sometimes people have setbacks. So having that knowledge, should someone have a setback, is incredibly important. In fact, I that's the culture of my practice. I foster that culture day in and day out, because I want my clients to know that if you have a setback, all you need to do is come and tell me. We're not trying to catch you, we're not trying to judge you, and what we're going to do is figure out what went wrong, and we're going to learn from it together so it doesn't happen again. And, they eventually get it, that this is a different culture than they're used to in other programs, and we're not punitive, and we're not...
Well, other programs will kick you out,
right,
or...
Right. And so...
Bro's locking you up.
Well, yeah, we don't lock anyone up. but that culture, for a family member is also critical, because, right?
I was going to say that the same connectedness that we need in our recovery, is that what we find in the context of the group. So where, Matt found a sober support network in his program, and he was able to identify, and that was, his path of recovery. We also need that, because you do feel so isolated, or you could feel isolated. I don't know where the courage came. It was desperation, really, for me, and selfishness. I really wanted a group near my home, and so I started one, because as much as I was a private person, I knew I was getting sicker and sicker. And I knew that if I didn't do something to reach out to other people who were going through the same thing, that I don't know, the disease would have taken me out, as well.
And it really is amazing when you look at it, and at least for me, when I came back and was back in this area, back in that same family dynamic that I had left. Obviously, a lot of things were different, but still our recovery process was like parallel. You know, it was like everything that I needed, you know, my family needed, maybe in a little bit of a different way, but they were recovering from that same, the resentments that were built up, the all of that chaos from the years and years and years. Just like I needed time to recover, so did they. And the more and more we've been a part of these groups, and the more and more families we've talked to, it's the same for everybody. That those recovery processes they run parallel with each other. And just like if I was recovering in a sober home with a bunch of gentlemen, you know, people can pull each other back down. If people aren't recovering at the same speed and someone's staying stuck, there's a very good chance that someone's going to pull somebody down before the other person's going to pull them up. And we see it happen. Yeah, we see it happen with families all the time where, you know, you look at a loved one who went away and is doing well and maybe has 60, 90 days and then decides to, you know, come back into that family dynamic. And, you know, maybe the loved one didn't come to group for the last 2 months before their loved one came home. And maybe they rested on their laurels a little bit and thought that, you know, my kid's just going to get saved. And then they come back into that same dynamic, and you know, that loved one might have been way up here, you know, but you're going to get pulled back down to the toxicity of that environment that you're in.
Matt, you also started your own kind of grassroots thing, right?
Yeah. About a year ago, a conversation between me and my mother, we were talking so much about that stigma, you know, and it's a huge part of my story. It's what kept me sick, the guilt, the shame. You know, I was my worst critic. No one was going to beat myself up more than I was. And it kept me from asking for help for so long. You know, yes, I was lucky enough to be able to walk up 2 flights of stairs and knock on the door and ask for help, but I was also 27 and had been doing opiates on a daily basis for 8 years up until that point. So it kept me sick for so long, and I knew there was so many other people like me out there that were sick. And one of the things that I kept saying when I would speak is, you know, everyone knows someone. Everyone out there knows someone that has struggled in their life, or probably will struggle in their life. So the catchphrase there is, if everyone knows someone, then why is it so difficult for everyone to talk about that? So I started a social media campaign. It's on Facebook and on Instagram. It's called Everyone Knows Someone. And what we do is we go out into the community and we talk to people and we start the conversation. And the people that are brave and have enough courage to talk to us, we do features on those platforms and tell people's stories and highlight people's stories. Because the reality is there's so many people out there in recovery that are your coaches, your teachers, your administrators, your politicians, these people who, unless you ask them, you would never know that they had struggled in their life. Unless you ask them, you would never know that they're in recovery. And those are the people that, in my opinion, need to stand up and be the face and be the voice for recovery, because it gives hope. You know, people tell me all the time, I can't believe that you used to live that lifestyle. Look at you now. And it's like, you know, if you knew me 3.5 years ago, you would have thought I was one of the hopeless variety, you know, that couldn't get this, that could not ever be in this position sitting here talking to all of you. And that's a part of the story that needs to be told, you know, is that when you're sitting there and say you're looking at your loved one, and I hear it from parents all the time, I just don't think she or he is really like that like you, like they'll never really get this. Mm-hmm. And I have to remind them, you know, people said the exact same thing about me, you know, and that's part of the story that it needs to be highlighted more, that we all come from that dark, scary place, but it doesn't mean we got to stay there.
No, there is, and I've learned in my 20-something years of doing addiction treatment, you can never predict who's gonna make it, you know. And sometimes people who look like they just have no shot, and they turn it around. And some people, they think, oh, this guy's got it, and then not so much. And we had a gentleman on. Was a couple 2 weeks ago, Daryl, who started his own grassroots organization called Soft Landing. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh yeah, when I called in.
Yeah, what an impressive guy this young man.
Amazing,
amazing, and you know, talk about coming from a dark place and where he was, pulling
whole
up-
story.
His whole story is incredibly inspiring, and you know I met him in the parking lot before, and I liked him after like 3 minutes, and I was impressed with him after like 8. You know, so
Yeah.
and what he's doing again, that grassroots thing, it's incredible. And I said on that show, there's no throwaway people. You know, we can't if where there's life, there's hope, and people can recover, and you come to my practice and you look around at the people in the groups, there's no face of opiate addiction. You know, there's no typical looking person.
No, not
There's
for
nothing.
opiates.
No, and
For all walks of life.
yeah, all walks of life, and I think I've said this almost every show. I'll say it again. You know, there's almost not a person in my 78 something people in my practice that I wouldn't be proud to call my friend. So it's not only there is an incredible mixture of people, but by and large, you know, opiate addiction is not about someone's character. And to put a pin on this, I'll every once in a while I'll bring out my doctor and throw some research at people. But there's research that shows that the the population at large has about 1%. About 1% of the people in our population meet the criteria for antisocial personality disorder, right? And they did a study to see what percentage of people who have addiction meet the criteria for antisocial personality disorder. Want to guess what it was?
1%.
1%. No, you're right. Jackie got it. 1%. There's no difference. Now, people who are using sometimes act antisocial ways, right? But that's part of the illness. And those people can become, as you know, you're sitting next to one, incredible members of our society.
I remember asking one of the therapists, you know, is my child a sociopath? You know, is this? I know I'm laughing now, but I mean, to think of the dark places, like Matt said, that this disease can take your, you know, somebody that you gave birth to, so your child, your you know, firstborn, your secondborn, is it's staggering, and that's the disconnect. You know, that we just don't get that. You know, we went to church, we had family dinners. He played Little
Right.
League and
Yep. And
Pop Warner football,
Right.
and you know, we were involved in the community youth group. You know, it doesn't make any
it does.
sense.
It doesn't. And you know, again, I do kind of emphasize that, again, opiate addiction is a little different. And I remember when I worked in what's now Turnbridge, I had this kid, the most likable kid. I mean, literally golden-haired, blonde-haired kids, big smile. Just everyone loved this kid. Voted most popular in his class. He was a baseball scholarship level. You know, he got a scholarship to play baseball at a great school, and he came from this very loving family, very close, very spiritual, religious family. And his mom called me up after he was there for about a week, and she was talking to me on the phone, and she was in tears and said, "What did I do wrong? My son was this. He was voted the most popular. He was this. He was that. We had this close family. We never. What did I do? What went wrong?" And I said to her, and this came directly. I know this, but this came directly from her son. I said, "You didn't do anything wrong. You know what went wrong?" She said, "What?" I said, "He tried it. That's what went wrong."
Yeah.
You know, the kid, one night, someone said, "Here, take this Oxy and you'll have a great time." And he did, and he was out at the bars, and he didn't have to drink that much, and he was able to talk to all the girls, and
He did have a great time.
and he had a great time, and had no hangover the next day, and then the next Friday night he said, "Let me have one of those again, and then, you know, let me have a couple to keep on hand in case I need it." And he got in a fight with his girlfriend and wanted to feel better, so he took one, and 6 months later he's off the baseball team, and he's physically addicted. And what went wrong? What went wrong was he tried it. It's not about, you know, the kid's character is not the problem. And I also tell my clients, if I became addicted to opiates, I think I have good morals and a good character and a good value system. I'm sure I would violate all of those. When you get desperate enough, when the opiates have a hold of you, most people, they do.
Well, I describe it to people as food. Like if you're if you get a nuclear bomb and you somehow survived, and after 4 or 5 days you would kill people for food. It becomes, your brain relates it to a survival mechanism.
Yes.
Like it needs it to survive. So just like you would fight for food or water or air, you're going to fight for that drug.
Yeah, and I liken opiate withdrawal to trauma. You know, people who've been through an opiate withdrawal, it's a trauma. And you will do what you have to do to avoid trauma.
Yeah.
You know? So,
Human nature.
and that's, I think, hard for some people, family members to really understand. And without that understanding, they take a strategy that seems to make sense, you know? And oftentimes, you said this illness polarizes families. You know, this is stereotypical, but this is the stereotype, so I'll just talk about it. Oftentimes, the mom is the enabler, and the father is the hard line, you know, hard ass, you know, and then there's discord between the parents. And sometimes it's reversed, but more often I find, you know, and neither parent really knows what the right thing to do is. Should I, you know, keep where should I fall along the continuum of enabling versus you know, abandoning, you know? And there's a line, and what should I do? And you know, when your things are stolen and you're being disrespected or whatever is going on, that is part of that illness. It's very hard to be objective, you know, and to understand how to maintain some level of objectivity and to maintain some level of neutrality, and to find a balance and open and keep the door open for your loved one to walk through when you're going through all that pain.
Now, how did your other 2 sons handle the addiction? Like, you have 4 altogether, right?
I have 4 children. My oldest is a foster daughter, who we acquired when she was
Sounds like a baseball team.
Yeah.
happily when she was in her teens. She was 16. Can I say this on the air? She's in her mid-40s now. And then Christian, my oldest son, 35, Matt, 31. And God thought I did such a good job with these 2 guys that we have Andrew, who's just 17.
Wow.
This God's plan baby late in life.
While he was going through his insanity, you were raising a little guy.
A little guy, yeah.
So
yeah.
that
Yeah, and
must
I
have
was-
been incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and I was starting off my freshman year, you know, with just, it was chaos. You know, that was right at the beginning of my older brother's introduction into heroin and everything that comes along with that, and the craziness and the chaotic house. So, you know, in a way, I was kind of in a situation where I was forced to grow up a little bit. I was seeing things and being, you know, witnessing a lot of just chaoticness, you know, fights and verbal fights that just, you know, were very, you know, traumatizing as a 13-year-old kid who's got to worry about, you know, starting freshman year and football practice the next day. Yeah. You know, so I had, at that point, you know, it was something that I just stuffed down. I didn't really know how to deal with it. It's a large part of the Everyone Knows Someone story to me, is that there's a lot of younger siblings of people that are using that see all this craziness and don't really have anywhere to go with that. You know, all I really had to go with from that is that, you know, I was a freshman in high school, and now all of a sudden marijuana and alcohol were readily available to me.
And we handled it really poorly in our home. So, you know, what did Matt experience was just like really poor handling of, you know, his older brother's disease.
Now, how is your older son?
Oh, he's great. He's 9 years clean and sober. I mean, you know, we have,
wonderful.
As a family, we have sort of devoted our vocations to the cause. So he's absolutely amazing. He's a new dad. He's married 2 years in a couple of weeks. He owns a treatment center.
Really?
Yeah, right outside of Philadelphia.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
That's awesome.
It's so awesome. I mean, my kids are miracles. They really. I mean, I can say that with great pride, and I'll take full ownership of it. Give it to God. That thing that you said before, that that you could not convince me that I wasn't totally, fully, completely responsible
Of course, right.
for my kids' diseases.
Right.
And to hear maybe for the first time, at Greenwich Hospital, detox, that about the neurochemistry of addiction, I said, oh, maybe there's something here that is outside of my control. Like,
Yeah.
maybe it's not my fault. Maybe, but I would take back, the guilt and blame and shame of it. Over and over and over again.
Again, not to be stereotypical, but if you were feeling that as a mother, that's often where the enabling piece comes in, right?
Absolutely.
I've done something wrong, therefore I must, make up
it
for
right.
that by making it right, and inadvertently maybe making the illness, making it easier for my son or daughter to continue in the illness by enabling them when that's not necessarily the right thing to do.
Right.
And when there's emotion involved, all bets are off and everything goes out the window. Like I said, my mother was, organizing these groups for years and years and years while I was still actively using it and using it at a level that, was almost fatal. And at that same time, my mother was able to counsel other parents and was able to counsel other family members of this is what you need to do and these are the steps you need to take. But when it comes to your own family, and there's that emotion involved, everything goes out the window. It's a large part of why we're successful doing what we do in these groups is because I can go in and sit in some of these groups and I can talk to a family and I can look at the family and the whole situation, take emotion completely out of it, look at it black and white and tell them exactly this is, what would have worked for me and this is in your situation what I feel like will work for you. And you could take that emotion out of it. But yet I have two friends that are very, very close with me to this day that are out using right now that I can't help. And I've tried over and over and over again, but I've come to the realization that I can't do it because with them, even though I know better and I know what this disease does, I will give them, this is a piece of advice I have for you, and then they don't do it, and I take it personal. Now
Yeah.
I'm upset with them and I'm angry with them for not doing this when I know what this disease does, and I know so much about what I would have done, and but yet I have to hands off. Like I can't when there's that much emotion involved. It's no good for me.
It's no good for anybody.
Exactly.
And I think if you're going to reach a place that's balanced and objective and healthy, and you have a family member, their welfare and the balance, well, you need a lot of support to do that. You can't just do that on your own. You need to see other people who have tried to get there and who have done well, even if it's just their own sanity, but also the outcome and all. I just think it's very hard to find the strength to be objective and to make decisions that are very scary to make unless you have support from other people around you.
This is another reason why we have gifted facilitators, one sitting in the studio tonight, where we can just turn to them. And with, I love to see how they love what they do and what they bring to the group and to, the families, because where that objectivity is necessary, also that skill, that naming that thing. I never thought I was codependent until I read the book on the way cross country to one of Matt's treatment centers. I said they should have put your picture on the cover of the book. and just, that understanding, that seeking to understand that people have when they come into the groups, to have the facilitators who can, they have that detached stance, but they also have the wisdom and the experience with, like I said, the psychology, the physiology of addiction. It's absolutely critical and what makes the groups move forward.
Yeah, they have a word for that detached stance. It's called therapeutic distance. And you have to have that, right? Because if I took personally the fact that all my clients don't always listen to my advice, I'd be in trouble. At the same time, if my clients felt like I didn't care about the outcome of their recovery, I wouldn't be effective. So, it's easier to have therapeutic distance when it's not your son, your daughter, and, your wife, and so forth. And so, to get knowledge, to get information and support and education from someone who has that ability to do that, it's very important. I want to make sure that people who are listening, who want to come to a meeting of CARES, if you can talk to them about how they can give them the phone number for the organization, the website, anything, so that they can access CARES.
Sure. The website is thecaresgroup.org. They can call. Our phone number is 855-406-0246. We also have a presence on Facebook, the CARES Group. And the Everyone Knows Someone is on Instagram and Facebook as well. Everyone Knows Someone.
And our groups, just to give you the days of the week and the location. Monday nights. First off, all of our groups are 7 to 9. They're drop-in groups. There's no, if you're not there at 7, we lock the door or anything. We have some people that will show up literally from 8:30 to 9 just to get that last little bit. So if you can't make it right at 7, drop in at any time from 7 to 9. Monday nights are in Danbury. Tuesday nights are in Trumbull. Thursday nights are both New Milford and Shelton.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to do a shameless plug for my practice, because I think we do something real special in terms of helping people with opiate addiction and combining therapy and medication and addressing both mental health and substance abuse in an integrated way. So, and also very importantly for anyone who's listening, if you do have struggling with opiate addiction and want help on an outpatient basis, and you have state insurance, know that we take your insurance and we can get you in within a day or so, usually. The Center for Compassionate Recovery, which I am a part owner of, is in Madison, and the phone number for I give people, if you want to call me directly, I don't mind giving out my personal cell phone number if you need advice or just want to talk about the fit that my organization may have for you. My cell phone number is 203-464-1001, and if you want to call the office to get an appointment, the phone number is 203-245-0412, and the website is ccrfreshstart.com. So just know that if you're out there struggling with opiate addiction, there is help, and I will say my practice has some really good outcomes. So there's help. Well, I really want to thank everyone, Jackie, you included, for coming. And I'm going to have,
I'm back.
and even though Teresa's had to remain silent today due to a very large frog in her throat, I will have her come back another time. And Matt and Donna, thank you so much for being here and for everything that you do.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's
for sure.
I have a lot of respect for both of you, and I'm glad things turned out the way they did, Matt.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay. All right, so we're going to sail away now. All right, see you everyone Monday. Thank you for listening. Good night, Thea. Good night, Sullivan.
You guys were here last Monday? For Labor Day?
2 weeks ago.
You're listening to PRNradio.net.
That was good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I sing the song because I love the man. I know that some of you don't understand. Milk blood to keep from running out. I've seen the